I thought the worst thing that could happen that night was losing power. I was wrong, because when the storm became violent enough to shake the windows of my house, my neighbor knocked on my door. And what he did after I let him inside was something I never could have imagined. My name is Emily. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 8 years, I had lived alone in a quiet suburban neighborhood where everyone seemed to know everyone else. At least, that's what I thought. My neighbor, Daniel, lived across the street. We had exchanged polite smiles, a few quick hellos. Sometimes a package would end up at the wrong house, and one of us would walk it across the street. That was the extent of our relationship. Until that night, it had been raining since late afternoon, but by 9 o'clock, the storm had become something else entirely. Thunder shook the walls. The trees outside bent violently in the wind. Every few seconds, lightning turned my living room bright white before plunging it back into darkness. I was sitting on the couch with a blanket around my shoulders when the lights suddenly flickered. Once, twice, then everything went black. I sighed and reached for the flashlight beside me. Perfect. I had just managed to light a candle when I heard something outside. A crash. Then another. I moved toward the window and looked through the curtains. A large branch had fallen across the street. Then I saw a figure running through the rain. For a moment, I couldn't tell who it was. Then lightning flashed. Daniel. He was soaked from head to toe. I watched him reach my front porch and raise his hand toward the door. Then he knocked 3 times. I hesitated. It was almost 10 at night. The storm was getting worse, and I couldn't understand why he had come to my house. Finally, I opened the door. Daniel, he stood there breathing heavily, rain dripping from his hair. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know it's late. Are you okay?" He nodded. Then he looked behind him toward the street. My house lost part of the roof. I stared at him. "What?" A tree came down. The back bedroom is flooding. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel looked at me and said something that I still remember. I didn't know where else to go. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked inside. I handed him a towel and watched as he wiped the rain from his face. The storm continued roaring outside. But strangely, once Daniel was standing in my living room, the house didn't feel quite as empty anymore. I made tea using the little camping stove I kept in the kitchen. Daniel sat across from me, while candlelight flickered between us. "I'm embarrassed," he admitted. "Why?" "I've lived across from you for almost a year, and the first real conversation we have happens because my roof is falling apart." I smiled. Maybe we needed a storm. He laughed quietly. Neither of us knew how true those words would become. For the next hour, we talked, not about the storm, about life. Daniel told me he had moved to the neighborhood after losing his wife 3 years earlier. He had never really talked about it with anyone nearby. He said he had convinced himself that being alone was easier. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. "I've been divorced for 6 years. I told him. He looked at me. "Do you miss being married?" I thought about the question. "Sometimes." "Do you miss him?" I shook my head. "No, I miss having someone to talk to." Daniel looked down at his tea. That's exactly it. The rain hit the windows harder. For a few seconds, we simply listened. Then Daniel said something that caught me completely off guard. "Emily, you always look happy." I laughed softly. "That's because you're only seeing me from across the street." He smiled. "Maybe." Then his expression became serious. "But I don't think you're as happy as you pretend to be." My smile disappeared. No one had ever said that to me before. And somehow, coming from him, it didn't feel insulting. It felt like someone had finally noticed me. "I could say the same about you," I whispered. He nodded. "I know." That was the moment everything changed. Not because we kissed. Not because something romantic happened. But because 2 lonely people finally stopped pretending they weren't lonely. Later that night, the storm became so strong that the windows rattled in their frames. Daniel stood up. "I should check my house." "You can't go out in that." "I have to." I grabbed his arm. "Wait until it calms down." He looked at my hand on his arm, then at me. "You worry about everyone, don't you?" "Only stubborn neighbors." He smiled. "Fair enough." He sat down again. Neither of us realized that Daniel had made a decision that would shock me before the night was over. Around midnight, the storm finally began to weaken. Daniel stood near the door. I should go. I nodded. Thank you for letting me stay. Of course. He reached for the doorknob, then stopped. He turned around. Emily? Yes. I need to tell you something. My heart suddenly beat faster. He walked back toward me. Before tonight, I thought I wanted to be alone. I didn't say anything, but sitting here with you made me realize something. He paused. I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone. I looked at him. Neither of us moved. Then he smiled sadly. And I'm not asking you for anything. I just thought you deserved to know. He walked out. I stood there long after the door closed. I couldn't sleep. His words kept circling through my mind. The next morning, the neighborhood looked completely different. Branches covered the roads. Fences had collapsed. Several yards were flooded. I stepped outside with a cup of coffee and saw Daniel standing across the street. He was staring at the damage to his house. I walked over. How bad is it? He sighed. Bad. I looked at the broken fence. Then let's fix it. He looked surprised. You. I smiled. You helped me survive the storm. Now let me help you clean up. For the next several hours, we worked together. We carried branches, moved broken pieces of wood, cleared his driveway. Every now and then we stopped to talk. And somehow, the cleanup became something more than cleanup. We laughed. We remembered things. We talked about the people we'd lost, the dreams we'd abandoned, the years we'd spent believing that our lives were already finished. By late afternoon, we were sitting on his front porch, exhausted. Daniel handed me a cold bottle of water. You know what I've been thinking? What? That this is the first time in years I've actually looked forward to tomorrow. I looked at him. So have I. He smiled. And that was how it began. Not with a perfect date. Not with some dramatic declaration. It began with two people sitting on a damaged porch after a storm. A week later, Daniel asked me to dinner. I said yes. That dinner turned into another. Then another. Soon, we were walking together almost every evening. Sometimes we talked for hours. Sometimes we said almost nothing. But silence with Daniel never felt empty. It felt comfortable. One evening, several weeks later, we were sitting on my porch when dark clouds began gathering again. I looked toward the sky. Please don't tell me another storm is coming. Daniel laughed. Maybe storms have become our thing. I smiled. Then he became quiet. Emily. What? He reached into his pocket. My heart stopped. He pulled out a small photograph. It was an old picture of his wife. I've carried this with me for years, he said. I looked at the photograph. She was beautiful. He stared at it for a moment. I thought loving someone again would mean betraying her memory. I gently touched his hand. You don't stop loving someone just because you love again. His eyes filled with tears. I know that now. He put the photograph away. Then he looked directly at me. You changed that for me. I smiled through my own tears. No, Daniel. I squeezed his hand. You changed of yourself. He leaned closer. And this time, neither of us was afraid. Our first kiss wasn't dramatic. It was gentle, almost hesitant. But somehow, it felt like the beginning of something we'd both been waiting for without realizing it. Months passed. Our lives slowly became intertwined. We had breakfast together. We took walks. We argued about silly things. We laughed about them afterward. And one evening, almost a year after the storm, Daniel asked to meet him at the place where we'd first really talked. His house had been completely repaired. The broken fence was gone. The roof was new. The yard looked beautiful. He stood beside the porch holding something behind his back. Do you remember what you told me that night? I smiled. That maybe we needed a storm? He nodded. Exactly. Then he pulled out a small box. My hands began trembling. Daniel, he opened it. Inside was a simple ring. I spent years thinking the best part of my life was behind me, he said. Then one storm knocked on my door. He smiled. And somehow, that storm led me to yours. Tears filled my eyes. Emily, I don't want to spend another day pretending I don't need you. He took my hand. Will you build the rest of your life with me? I couldn't speak at first. Then I laughed through my tears. Yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger. And as we stood there together, I looked toward the sky. The clouds were gathering again. But this time, I wasn't afraid, because I finally understood something. Sometimes a storm doesn't come into your life to destroy something. Sometimes it comes to clear away everything that was keeping you from seeing what you truly needed. Daniel and I never planned to meet that way. We never expected one terrible night to change everything. But it did. And whenever it rains now, we sit together by the window and remember the night two lonely people stopped pretending they were fine on their own. That storm took down fences. It damaged houses. It frightened an entire neighborhood. But it also opened a door. And behind that door, I found something I thought I had lost forever. Hope. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Would you have opened the door that night? And if you enjoy emotional stories about unexpected love, second chances, and the moments that change our lives, subscribe for more. Because sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives begin on the nights we wish had never happened.